Hi, today I'm going to be talking about my biggest regrets as a reader. And before getting into this, I know that not everyone believes in the concept of regret. Some people think that we make the decisions we make for a reason, that every mistake that we make in the past leads us into the path that we're destined to go on, or that we learn things from our mistakes. And I can understand that perspective, but I definitely have regrets as a reader. And I want to share these today because one, maybe you can learn from my regrets. And two, I also want to offer some positive reframes for these decisions I made, different ways of looking at it in a positive light. If that's possible, we'll see. And I also want to add that there isn't a single book that I have ever regretted reading. So nothing on this list will include a book that I regret having read. I just want to make that clear right now. So, my first regret as a reader is that I didn't continue on in the Dark Towers series when I started it or after reading The Gunslinger a couple of years ago. I understand a lot of people love this book, The Gunslinger, and I understand why. And I know some people aren't as in love with this book as others. And I fell into that category. I read the book and I enjoyed it. I thought it was okay, but I didn't fall in love with it. And I had very high expectations of the Dark Tower series. I had never read any Stephen King books before reading The Gunslinger. And I just felt like I wasn't sure it was for me or that I was really connecting to it on the level I had hoped. So I didn't continue on in the Dark Tower series for a long time. And I greatly regret that because I finally got around to reading The Drawing of the Three at the end of last year. And I just recently read The Wastelands. And I loved those books. They were so, so good. I am so impressed with King's ability to write such immersive atmospheres. I loved some of the themes in these books, and I loved the character work and the way that the characters interact with each other. It is so fascinating. So I regret that I waited so, so long. And I guess a positive reframe for that might be that, well, I have read more fantasy since I started The Gunslinger, and maybe I'm able to appreciate certain things that King is going for now than I would have when I had read The Gunslinger or right after reading The Gunslinger, because like I said, I've read other fantasy since then. And this particular series is known for being very genre bending. And so maybe I'm more open minded to different genres now. And I want to make sure that I am really equipped for that, especially because I think that this series has so much to offer. My next regret also has to do with not continuing a series. You'll see a theme here in this video, and that has to do with not continuing on with the Dune series after reading Dune almost 10 years ago now. And here's the thing, it took me a while to pick up Dune by Frank Herbert. A lot of my friends that I grew up with were huge, longtime Dune fans. I remember at one point as a teenager, we watched part of the 80s movie, which was terrible, the one with Sting in it. And they all swore to me that the book was way, way better. I'm sure that the new adaptation that's coming out soon will be much better than that old adaptation. But in any case, it did take me a while to pick up the book because I hadn't read much sci-fi at all before reading Dune. I was extremely intimidated. I hadn't read very much fantasy before Dune either. So I didn't know if it was going to be too difficult for me, if it was going to be too smart for me, but I loved that book. I remember thinking it was possibly the best book I had ever read once I finished, and I really wanted to continue on in the Dune series, but somebody I greatly trusted at the time promised me I would be disappointed if I continued on. He told me that I should definitely not continue on, in other words. And I know that the series is later continued by Frank Herbert's son and that it's very extensive. But I regret not continuing on, honestly, because I had so much excitement and momentum when I finished Dune. And I did go into a little bit of a reading slump after that. Nothing major. I did start picking up other classic sci-fi books after reading Dune. I remember reading what is it? Ender's Game and Stranger in a Strange Land and a 2001 Space Odyssey, and they were all fine, but nothing quite hit me like Dune did. And I just wish I had continued on when I had the chance. And maybe uh, the positive reframe for that is that I will be rereading Dune in August, and I'm very excited about that. I have some great plans for that, and maybe this will be exciting because Of course, the adaptation, the new one, is coming out soon. And so there's a lot of momentum built up for that. And it's never too late to continue that series, I suppose. The next regret I have also kind of follows this theme, and that is that I didn't finish The Lord of the Rings when I was a teenager. Shame on me. How can I call myself a fantasy reader, right? So I read The Hobbit and The Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers in high school. I loved those books, and I definitely felt like they influenced me in a very deep way. But I started The Return of the King, and I just, for whatever reason, didn't finish it. My life was just a bit crazy at that time. And every time I tried to return to Return of the King, I kept feeling like I needed to go back. So I would reread The Hobbit and The Fellowship of the Ring, and I just kept getting stuck, and I could never continue on for whatever reason. And it breaks my heart right now because I am reading The Return of the King. I'm almost finished with it. And I love it so, so much that it's very bittersweet for me, realizing I could have had this experience so long ago when I was a teenager, and I'm only having it now. And maybe the positive reframe for that could be that I could be an inspiration for you to read The Lord of the Rings if you never read it as a teenager. I know a lot of people read it when they were 10 as well or younger. So it's kind of embarrassing, but it's not too late. And let me be your inspiration if you haven't picked up The Lord of the Rings, because it is worth it. It is incredible. I don't agree with the people who think that the movies are better. I think the books are better, honestly. I love it so, so much. So that is my take on that. And then going on from there, I am going to say that my next regret doesn't have to do so much with not continuing a series. It has to do with forcing myself to continue series. And I'll explain what I mean by explaining the end of 2020. At that time, there were 3 new releases that came out all around the same time period for ongoing series or the completion of some certain series. So one was The Burning God by R.F. Kuang, which is the third book, the third and final book in the Poppy War trilogy. And then another one was The Fires of Vengeance, which is the second book, in the sequel to The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. And then the third book was the Rhythm of War book, the fourth book in the Stormlight Archive. And I put a lot of pressure on myself to read those books as soon as they came out. Now, again, I don't regret any book I've ever read, so I don't regret having read those books, but I regret having put so much pressure on myself to read them when I did, because for each of these books, and this is a controversial take, they were all a bit of a disappointment for me personally. And I really wish I hadn't pressured myself so hard, though, especially with the Stormlight Archive book, Rhythm of War, because to be fairly honest, I was loving Sanderson's books in the middle of last year. And by the time I got to the end of the year, I read Rhythm of War and Dawn Shard and Edge Dancer, which are 2 of his novellas, and this book called The Original, all within like a month period or a 2-month period. And it was too much Sanderson for me. I got burnt out. I got way burnt out. And it's a shame because I was really enjoying Sanderson's work up until then, but just certain aspects of his writing style really fatigued me after a while. And maybe that can happen with any author, but it's a shame because ever since this year began, ever since then, I just haven't had any interest in reading any Sanderson or learning anything about the Cosmere or anything. And I know that that's a kind of a controversial take. Nothing against him. I'm not saying that I will never read another Stormlight book or that, I've given up completely, but I just know for right now, I just have no interest. And and maybe a positive reframe for that is that all happened towards the end of last year, like I said, and I started my channel in January, and it really did feel like starting my channel was a fresh start. I decided when I started my channel, although it was trendy at the time, to do videos on all my thoughts on books I read in 2020. It just felt good to put that behind me and to start fresh. And I do have to admit that my reading taste, in my opinion, has dramatically changed in the last several months. So ever since that period, I feel like what I appreciate in books has changed. What I look for in enjoyment has changed. And, nothing against those books and having enjoyed some aspects like that in the past, but it's different for me now, and that's okay. And that's maybe a good thing. The next regret I have has to do with the series I am enjoying, and that is the Malazan Book of the Fallen. I regret that I spaced out the three first books to the extent that I did. And to explain this, I read Gardens of the Moon a couple of years ago. I think that was like 2019, which seems so long ago now. And I waited for a while before picking up Dead House Gates. I loved Gardens of the Moon, by the way. I absolutely loved it. But I decided to wait a while before picking up Dead House Gates for various reasons. And then when I did, I didn't really know anything about Malazan Book of the Fallen at the time. So I was definitely thrown off by being on a whole new continent and having a whole new cast of characters and all of that. But in any case, I did struggle with Dead House Gates. Now, I really do think that's going to be different on a reread, but as a first time reader, I did have struggles with that book. And it was interesting because I finished the book and I did really appreciate the ending of that book. And then some time went by, some months went by, and I found myself continuing to think back on that book, and it stayed with me, and that really surprised me. And then I ended up returning to the series. I explained all of this in a video called My Malazan Journey So Far, which I'll link below in case you're curious. But I did return to the series and have been loving it ever since. But I really feel like I would have gotten much more out of it had I not spaced out the books to the extent that I did. Although I am one of those type of readers who has been reading Malazan Book of the Fallen and putting other books in between the books, I still think I would have made more connections between storylines and themes and things if I had not spaced them out so much. But the lesson I took from that is that right now I am trying not to do that, and I am trying to prioritize Malazan Book of the Fallen books. And I think it's just helped me have a lot more focus to make that a priority. But yeah, that's my regret. And I guess that's my sort of reframe for that. And then my next regret has to do with the book that I didn't pick up, and that is The Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abrams. And to explain this, I found this book in a Barnes and Noble several years ago, and I almost picked it up. It felt like it was calling to me, possibly because it was called a quartet. And me being a musician, the word quartet just makes me think of music. But I really was curious about this book, and I kept on picking it up off the shelf in Barnes and Noble and then putting it back, thinking, well, it's kind of high in price. What if I don't like it? And then I did that twice. I did that in two different Barnes and Nobles in two different cities. And then I finally ended up picking up Mistborn because it was shorter and cheaper, and I had heard a bit more about that book. But I really regret it because all these years later, now I am constantly hearing so much praise for the Long Price Quartet, especially from Alan at the Library of Alexandria. And I really wish I had picked it up when I did, because I could be talking about this to Alan right now. And instead, I'm not. And so many other people have been reading The Long Price Quartet and loving it, thanks to Alan. And it's just a shame to me because now I can't find it anywhere. There's not even a Kindle edition available, and I can't find it on Amazon. I can find like maybe a very expensive used copy, but otherwise I can't find any copies on Amazon. I can't find any copies at any Barnes and Noble anywhere. So it's just too bad. I'm really sad that I didn't pick it up when I had that calling for it. And I guess the only positive reframe I can come up with for that is that if I had the Long Price Quartet right now, I wouldn't have time to read it right away anyway, because I would really like to prioritize Malazan Book of the Fallen right now. But I am eager to get to it next year if possible. And maybe another positive reframe is maybe they will print more editions or a new type of edition that I will enjoy. That's my hope anyway. That's the best I can come up with. And I feel like that's kind of lame. So if you can come up with a better one, please let me know. And thank you so much for watching. Do you have any reading regrets? I want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments below. And if you have a channel and you want to do a video like this, feel free, just let me know because I want to watch it. I love this topic, and I hope you learn from some of my mistakes, and I hope that I learn from you if you have any positive spins to offer. And thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.